Hello and welcome to another video review. This is Iron Grip Warlord for PC. This review is coming to you courtesy of Lord Chaos. He sent me this, so thank you. It is greatly appreciated. This is a first-person shooter base defense game by ISOTX, and it's actually the semi-follow-up to Iron Grip the Oppression, which was a Half-Life 2 mod. And it was actually a pretty cool mod. It was a mix of strategy and first-person shooter. One team was heavily involved with the strategy side of things. The other team was a full-on first-person shooter team. And it actually worked out fairly well. It did have some problems in it, of course, because it's a Half-Life 2 mod. But it's still pretty cool of a concept, and you don't normally see this sort of thing. So, Iron Grip Warlord, on the other hand, is a full standalone release, and it actually runs on the Quake 3 engine of all things, but was released in 2008. So, I'll get to that in a moment. But suffice to say, it's an interesting concept to take this particular idea for a mod and turn it into a full standalone game. So, how did they do on that? Well, as far as the presentation goes, you have to remember this is very limited by the engine, which I mentioned before. It's Quake 3. And this game does not look good. It doesn't look terrible either, but it just doesn't look good. It looks like something much older than it actually is. And so, as a result, you have somewhat jagged modeling. The texture work isn't all that great. Most of it's pretty low res. The animations seem kind of awkward and jerky, and there's a lot of weird contortion going on with the joints and such. So, the visuals do not impress at all, and it really doesn't help that the color scheme, while appropriate for this particular setting and everything, is very, very bland. It's mostly brown and gray and not much else. So, visually, this game is just unimpressive on all fronts, and it's actually kind of a hurdle you have to get past sometimes if you are really, really used to all the high-fidelity graphics and everything. Particularly for a game from 2008, it's just you don't expect something to look like this. Then, of course, there's the sound design, which is acceptable. There's not really any voice acting to speak of that I ever really noticed. If there was any that I noticed, then I obviously forgot about it, because it just wasn't that great. But the sound effects are acceptable. They're not particularly impressive. The weapons don't sound particularly beefy or concussive or anything. They sound kind of stock for the most part, actually. And so, again, they work, but they don't really impress you. And the music is just kind of there. It's your standard orchestral kind of music that works okay, but it's not particularly memorable or really gets you in the mood for anything. But what really matters, the story and the gameplay, and the story in this is pretty much non-existent apart from some backstory that you get. The simple reason for that is there is no single-player campaign, nor is there any real reason to have one. It's primarily a multiplayer experience. But suffice to say, you play as a group in a place called Atelia. And Atelia is a nation known for abundant resources as well as being incredibly diverse. And the Confederation has started to invade it. The Confederation is the massive nation bordering it to the south. And it's also sandwiched between that and the Republic of Ramos, but you never really fight Ramos. You'll be fighting the Confederation. And that's literally your entire storyline right there. That's all you really need to know. In fact, you don't even need to know that storyline, because the game is just play it to play it. And what ends up happening with the gameplay is that it's an interesting concept. It is basically tower defense, only without the towers. It's base defense, and you build things in the pathways. So, the various pathways that you'll see throughout the game obviously vary depending on map, and you can place items like machine gun nests in various locations to take care of the stream of soldiers that will be running in and trying to destroy your headquarters. And, of course, you'll also have to deal with some mechs, basically. There's walkers called Iraqs, and tanks as well. It is diesel punk, so you do have these things. And you'll have to deal with those not only with the various things that you can build, but also the weapons you can get. You get resources in a steady trickle rate, basically, and can use these resources to either buy weapons or upgrades for your character, like faster reloading and more damage and moving faster, that sort of thing. But you can also use it to build your various things in the pathway, so you have to kind of budget out your resources rather carefully. And it's surprisingly easy for the enemy to kind of sneak behind you, so to speak. And you don't really think about that very much because the AI in this game is pretty much brain dead. They go in straight lines for the most part, and there are a few units here and there that will just break off from the pack and run off into the odd space in between the rest of the stuff in the map. So occasionally they'll pop up behind you with a flamethrower or something, and you'll have to deal with them. But the game itself is actually very simple in the way it plays out, and the single player, which is unfortunately what I had to play because nobody plays this thing online anymore. The single player ends up being a rather tedious experience because you have these just constant streams of soldiers just running in along with tanks and everything. So since your AI squad mates don't really help you all that much, they just kind of run into the fray and get themselves killed, you're kind of in a situation where you're the only thing standing between that entire massive army that's coming at you and your headquarters. So unless you're playing on certain maps, you're going to have a very difficult time. And that's just the way it is. Now, again, that budgeting of resources also comes in to be a noticeable problem when you have this large army coming in, especially on higher difficulties where it gets ridiculous. But think about it this way. You start off with a musket. It's a single-shot musket. And they've got a huge army coming at you with machine guns, basically. So you have to find a way to deal with that. And you do get a wide arsenal available to you. It consists of things like shotguns, sniper rifles, that sort of thing, as well as things you can use against the tanks and the walkers and everything. But you have to spend all your resources on that right off the bat. Otherwise, you can't really do anything to fight off these hordes. Now, one nice thing is that once you've bought a certain item, it's permanent. So it lasts the rest of that particular round. And you don't have to keep buying ammo for anything. It automatically replenishes your ammo when you respawn and everything. And so long as you have a headquarters to speak of, then of course you can keep playing. But it becomes very easy for the AI to swarm your headquarters and destroy it on certain maps and higher difficulties. Because again, it gets pretty ridiculous sometimes when your AI squad mates do nothing. Now, basically the way you win is that you reduce the enemy morale to 0. And you do that by taking out enemies, taking out walkers, as well as taking out officers for the enemy. And in fact, officers boost their morale. So you have to take them out immediately, otherwise they'll just keep replenishing all their morale. And that gets pretty annoying. So when your AI squad mates, again, don't run off and do that to help you out, you have to do everything yourself. Now, multiplayer would be far, far better, I guarantee you. But again, I can't play the multiplayer because nobody plays this thing online anymore. And that's a shame, because I can see the potential it has. It's not a very complex game, and I can see where it would wear off fairly quickly. But it's still fun when you get a group together and kind of go for these sorts of things. Just tower defense in general kind of works better with a group. But again, this isn't really a tower defense game, it's a base defense game. So ultimately, the problem with Iron Grip Warlord is more the community than the game itself. The game itself is just kind of a one-trick pony. It does what it does pretty well, for the most part, although it does have a few issues here and there, like glitches and stuff that you'll notice, and the brain-dead AI on the enemies, for the most part. And apart from doing that one thing well, it doesn't really have anything going for it. So if you're a fan of base defense games, this is something that you might want to look into, especially if you can get it to work over a LAN or something, because I can see this being a pretty good LAN party game. But ultimately, again, nobody plays this thing online anymore, and it is primarily a multiplayer game. So there's something that went wrong there. I don't know what. I don't know whether the appeal was just too low or what. But Iron Grip Warlord ends up being a very underwhelming game as a result. I give it a 2.5 out of 5. Thanks for watching.